Hey everyone, I'll give it just a couple minutes to see if anyone joins. If not, I'll start. So, first off, just apologize. I haven't put many videos up here lately. I have been doing stuff politically. I've been meeting with Republicans in my county and other counties in Pennsylvania, trying to come up with a strategy for how's it going, Dib, with what I'm going to do for the 2020 election to try to help Republicans in Pennsylvania. And for those of you who don't know, hey, if you're not a Republican, don't worry. I still think my channel has a lot of stuff for you. I would say at this point I'm more anti-establishment, which happens to be the establishment Democratic Party. Thanks, Rob. Than anything else. So I think that we're at a crucial point where we need to be able to defeat what I see as the establishment Democratic Party that controls all of our cultural institutions of power, and that wants to increase government control massively. For example, if you look at what I was talking about last week with Google's ability to swing 15 million or more votes, we seem to be at a threshold, whereas if we don't start doing something now, our voice might be lost forever. We see that with the Trump-Russia investigation, things like that, where deep state actors can usurp what we think. Also, I'd like to apologize for my voice. I was kind of camping this weekend and yelling a little, so that's where that went. So I'll dive right in. Now, I'm not doing these stories in order of why I think they're most important. I'm just doing them in order that I most wanted to talk about them. The first thing I wanted to talk about was Dave Chappelle. So for those of you who watch my channel or know me in real life, I'm a huge fan of comedy. And when I say comedy, I mean all sorts of comedians. I like stand-up comedy. I like sketch comedy shows. I like sitcoms. People that range the gambit from all sorts of clean comedians, people that are very vulgar, people that are edgy, people that aren't edgy. I like comedy of all sorts. I've been kind of bemoaning the state of comedy lately because I feel like exactly what was happening with Lenny Bruce when you saw back in the 50s and 60s where he was being censored, and most of this was coming from the right. But it was a form of art. Comedy to me is a way to kind of lampoon and tell truths and also bring people together. And when you start censoring it, it leads to bad things happening. And so I feel that that's where we're at now, except all of this censorship's coming from the left. And it's even more nefarious than what it was back in the days of Lenny Bruce because it's self-censorship. Because, as I talk about all the time, all of these cultural institutions of power that control our public narrative are controlled by the establishment left wing, and they're all woke at this point. And so that's why you've seen for years comedians like Chris Rock, Jerry Seinfeld, others saying, we won't even go on college campuses anymore because the people just want to be offended. And that not only leads to a world where we can't tell truths because, excuse me, forgive my voice again, where we can't tell truths because one of the easiest and best ways to point out uncomfortable truths of those that are more powerful than you is to make fun of them. Once that's been eliminated, not only will we not be able to make fun of or point out criticisms of the people that are in charge of us, which we could see in other ways I could talk about. Remember, CNN said you can't even criticize the FBI or that makes you anti-American. That's a news organization whose job is to hold the powerful to consequence. Not only are they not doing that, they're telling you as an individual, if you do that, you're a bad American, you're hurting things, and that could be fake news, and you could be doxxed, and you could be censored, which I'll get to in the New York Times story next. And so that's what happened. Not only we lose that, but we also lose just the ability to come together and have fun. Like, let's look at Chapelle as a person and what he did. I saw Dave Chapelle at my university, Clarion University, the year that Chappelle's show first came out. I thought he was a great comedian. He's not my favorite of all time, but he's definitely high up there in comedians that have lived in my lifetime as far as, I think, not just the hilarity that they bring, not just to stand up, but also his TV show, but also kind of the ability to bring people together kind of with awkward truths or just by poking fun at each other. Chappelle's show did a great job of that. It made fun of the black community, the white community, the straight community, the gay community, Christian community, Republicans, Democrats. That's kind of what's great. It's the same thing about South Park. Now, you know that all of these comedians, whether it be Chappelle or the creators of South Park, whoever, they have personal bias. They have personal political beliefs and philosophical beliefs and religious beliefs. But it's hard to really get a ground of where a great comedian is because they'll just make fun of everyone. Like South Park, I've heard they're Republicans. It seems obvious to me they don't like Trump, but they certainly make fun of the left a lot. The same could be said of Chappelle. The same could be said of someone like Ricky Gervais. I would guess Chappelle and Gervais are quite liberal people, but the truth is the establishment left is illiberal at this point. Liberals allow all sorts of free speech. They allow all sorts of opinions. The woke people are not that. They're the exact opposite. And they're more powerful because it's not just that they're orchestrating boycotts and powerful enough to get you kicked off your show or anything, but they're encouraging self-censorship. People are afraid, comedians are afraid to go outside the box. The biggest travesty that occurs in this is comedy's just not funny anymore. You know, I remember being young and watching old clips of Johnny Carson. Johnny Carson was not political at all. He could bring a Republican on, a Democrat the next section, someone who's very religious, a Led Zeppelin type, alcoholic rock star, whatever, and he could have fun and a great time, be hilarious and lighthearted with all of them. But that's not what you're seeing today. You're seeing, like, your SNLs that are just anti-Trump to the point where they had cold openings when Hillary lost where they all sat around and cried. And the same's true of every late-night show. What's the difference between Conan, Colbert, Seth Meyers, Jimmy Fallon? They all have the same take. Trump's bad. Ha 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 ha. Trump. Ha ha ha. And I don't mind the jokes. It's not that I get offended because they're making fun of someone I support. That's not it at all. In fact, some of the times, when Colbert said he thought Trump's mouth was Putin's sea holster, I chuckled and I thought the phrase was funny. I don't mind. I don't mind them making fun of people I like. It's all the exact same. And for those of you might have heard me talk about this before, one of my all-time favorite comedians is Norm Macdonald. Norm Macdonald was hosting Last Comic Standing, which is basically like American Idol, except it's for comedians. And the comedian stands up and he does this bit about Christianity doesn't like gays, so if they're going to quote from the Bible, he's going to quote from his book, which is Harry Potter. And Norm Macdonald basically chastised the guy, for one, that Harry Potter is basically a Christian allegory, but second, because it's not brave to get up in front of a bunch of people that hate Christians and talk about how you hate Christians. It would be brave if you went in front of a church maybe and said that, or it would be brave if you defended Christians in front of this Hollywood crowd. But everyone just goes along to get along. And I don't care what form of art you are. If you're music, if you're a painter, if you're a photographer, if you're a comedian, any of those forms of art, when the society tells you it all has to go in one direction and that it's unacceptable morally to go in a different direction, that art declines and it starts to decay. Johnny Rotten from the Sex Pistols, I saw him say 2 years ago, to be punk in today's world means to be a Trump supporter. Because everybody in the establishment hates Trump. So it's easy to just stand up and say, yeah, I hate Trump too. Now, does that mean that you have to like Trump or that you can't make fun of him? No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying I'm not offended by the comedy in the sense that, it was mean words or something. I'm offended that it's not funny. It's just not funny anymore. It's not original. It's not funny. It's not edgy. So along comes Chapelle. And the name of his special is Sticks and Stones, which is obviously alluding to the fact of words can't hurt you. Jokes are funny. We should stop trying to cancel people based on jokes they tell. And if you haven't seen it, it makes fun of every group you can think of. It makes fun of white people, it makes fun of black people, makes fun of Asians, makes fun of LGBTs. But the best joke is the most poignant joke is at the beginning where he says, I'm going to do some impressions. Here's my impression of the Founding Fathers writing the Constitution. Hey, N-word, get that Constitution done. And basically implying the Founding Fathers forced slaves to write the Constitution, which is funny. You get what he's trying to say. It's a joke. But the real genius in this is he's setting up the audience, right? Because he knows that his challenge, he can say anything he wants. He can say anything that's anti-white, anything that's anti-Trump, and he's going to get a big applause line from the audience, from critics, etc. So he sets it up with that. He sets it up like, it's this social justice-y type joke. And then the very next thing he says, he's like, okay, here's my next impression. And my voice isn't very good, and I'm not good at retelling other jokes anyways, but he basically says, I'm going to, anyone who does anything creative, I'm going to go back in their life, and it doesn't matter if it's 5, 10, 15, 20 years, I'll find one bad thing you did, and then I'll take everything you have and ruin you. Who am I? And the crowd yells, Trump! And he says, no, I'm you. That's what you, the audience, sounds like to me. And this is exactly that. It's honestly a perfect point. It's a perfect joke at this point in time because Chappelle's being honest here. He's expressing his frustration with the fact that he's sick and tired of comedians or just regular everyday people being brought down for misspeaking or for jokes that they told 10, 15, 20 years ago. I mean, he's tired of it. And the rest of his show, he makes a point to basically attack all these sacred cows. Like, he's making fun of the LGBT. He's making fun of, like, the idea of racism. He's making fun of all these different groups, right? Because he's not supposed to. He makes fun of, for example, he makes fun of the Me Too movement. He knows he's not supposed to, and even makes a comment of it. He makes fun of Jesse Smollett. All of these things that it's supposed to be edgy, and his entire point, I think, is, yeah, I don't care. They're just words, and I'm going to tell jokes that I think are funny, and I am who I am. I'm not a bigoted person, and I tell these jokes because I think they're funny, and I think they could bring us together, and I think that there are truths in them. And it's, he, of course, predictably, Vice News comes out right out of the gate, oh, this isn't good. A bunch of social justice-y type people aren't happy with him. But he doesn't care. I mean, if anyone doesn't care, it's Dave Chappelle, who could have been making historic amounts of money had he just kept going, phoning it in with the Chappelle show. But he didn't want to. He quit. Now, I caution people, don't think that this means that Chappelle then, whatever your political beliefs, he must believe them. I doubt that's true. I have no clue. I would guess he's probably a liberal person. I guess he probably hates Trump. I don't know if he'd vote Democrat or not. I don't know or care. I remember reading a George Carlin book once, and at the beginning of the book, in the preface, it kind of had George Carlin talking about all of the reasons he hates humanity and doesn't want to be lumped in with them. And it's just, greed and gluttony and, all this stuff, how horrible people could be. And then at the end of it, he says, and by the way, if you solve all of those problems, I still don't want to be part of your group. And I think that a lot of comedians are this way. I think Dave Chappelle would probably be this way as well, where he's not saying what he's saying because he wants to be brought into your group. He's a comedian. He's saying what he's saying. At this point, he's not struggling to survive. He probably has enough money to do what he wants, to live comfortably. And so he's out there doing the art that he wants to do. He doesn't have to do the art that a benefactor wants him to do because he's trying to make a living. And so the point he's trying to make, the overall point is just, say what you want. It doesn't make you a bad person. And I think that he's right when he says this is the worst time to be a celebrity. And it's not just celebrity. It's, I'll take it a step further. I don't know if he would agree with this, but to be in the public eye at all. I'm certainly not a celebrity. Many of these people you see whose lives are ruined aren't celebrity. Maybe they just made a meme about CNN getting a headlock or getting a pile driver. That was enough for CNN to dox them and ruin their life. Maybe they just happened to be wearing a MAGA hat and someone filmed them while a bunch of black people yelled at them racist and a Native American took the racist side and their life was ruined because of that. And so on and so forth. And it goes both ways. Look, one of the most aggravated I get is I get the idea of, as someone who's conservative and Republican, making fun of these social justice warriors because they can't handle a joke. Anytime they see Pepe, they have a heart attack. Anytime they see a meme, they want it censored. Anytime they see a comedian that says something they deem offensive, they want them kicked off the Oscars, like Kevin Hart, which Chappelle talks a lot about. Or, their special to be taken off. Like Norm Macdonald had to, grovel in front of the women on The View to keep his Netflix special on. That's what they demand. We shouldn't become that on the other side. And I don't care if you're liberal, conservative, Republican, Democrat, you shouldn't be that way. That's why it upsets me when I see people on the right say, oh, there was a play where they're what was they doing? Like redoing Marcus Aurelius or something, and they cast Trump as a person who looked like Trump was the main person and was executed. Oh, we have to stop that play. Oh, Kathy Griffin had a bad joke with Trump's severed head. Oh, Samantha Bee said feckless C word about Ivanka Trump. I don't care. I don't want them censored. Oh, Sarah Silverman, she wore blackface once, so she shouldn't be allowed to be in this movie. No, it's all garbage. I don't care. It's jokes. Go back and listen to Patrice O'Neill talk about jokes. He talks about how all the jokes you think are hilarious, they come from the same place of the ones you hate and the ones you think are offensive. So if you're willing to give the comedian the benefit of the doubt when they're picking on groups you like or when they're telling jokes that you like, then you should be willing to give them the benefit of the doubt elsewise. I'm sick and tired of this cancel culture. One of the examples I give, and I'm trying to You know, I think the Republican Party needs to reach out into new demographics. One of the demographics that we should be reaching out to is young people. And my selling point to young people, there's a lot to say, such as socialism's going to rack up the national debt even more than it is. And who do you think is going to pay that? Is Bernie Sanders going to pay the $17 trillion tab? No, it's going to be you, the young person. You're the one who eventually will pay that tab. So that's one reason not to vote for the establishment Democratic Party. But one of the reasons is, which party right now is more of the party of fun? You know, now remember, listen, people say I've changed. People that have known me my whole life, I changed. How could I vote for Trump? Well, one of the things I've always been is for free speech and free expression. I'm all for it. What group was censoring Lenny Bruce? That was basically coming from the church, Catholic Church. Which group made the comic book code? That was kind of right-wing censorship that said comics couldn't say certain things. Which group went after music in the 80s? That was more of a right-wing thing. Which group went after violent video games and things like that? That was more of a right-wing thing. I was against all of that. Now which group's censoring art? Now which group's saying you can't have fun? Remember the Heisman Trophy winner a couple years ago? Imagine this. All of your friends every Friday night, every weekend when you're in high school, they're going out partying. What are you doing? You're in the weight room. You know, you're in the practice field. You're doing whatever you can because you've invested that this is going to be what you do with your life. It's going to help you get an education opportunity in college. It's possibly going to get you into the NFL. You bust your butt the entire way through high school, through college. You reach the pinnacle of the sport. You win the Heisman Trophy. Probably the greatest professional, even though you're not a pro yet, but other than like family things like maybe getting married or the birth of a kid or something like that, the greatest moment in your life. So what happens to this guy who wins the Heisman a couple years ago? Well, they reach back through his Twitter feed and find out when he was like 14, he called someone a slang word for gay that begins with F on his Twitter feed. And so that becomes the news cycle. Oh, we got a lot of Robs on here today. And yeah, like what you're saying, Rob B, as far as gangster rap, right, it's selectively applied. You know, this has to do with the cultural Marxism. Some groups are oppressors, some are oppressed. Gangster rap, yeah, they're an oppressed group. They could say all this stuff. They could be misogynist, homophobic, violent, you know, racist. It doesn't matter. That's okay. But eventually, the problem with this kind of cancel culture is it will always come for you. And so these rappers, if you're part of this group, ask Jay-Z how it's going now. Well, he's, you know, had an endorsement deal with the NFL. Oh, but the NFL didn't like Kaepernick, so now Jay-Z's a sellout. And all of, you know, we're going back and we're canceling people because they sang songs like Baby It's Cold Outside. What do you think's going to happen 20, 30 years from now when we look back at Obama having people like Snoop Dogg in the White House? Let's look at some of his lyrics. Or Jay-Z. Those lyrics are far more misogynistic. So this entire idea of cancel culture is stupid. And if you're young, all of us have done dumb things. Look, we're entering a generation. I'm 35. I was kind of right on the precipice of, you know, I remember when Facebook came out, like right when I started college, maybe a year or two before I started college. But before that was MySpace, and you had Instant Messenger and things like that. I didn't mess around with much of that, to be honest. It was just getting going. But the people that are closest, like, you know, if you're 20 now, the people that are younger than me, the generation below me, everything you did when you were young, to some extent, online, on Facebook, on, you know, somewhere. You used to be able. Do you really think that people talk worse today or have worse sense of humor, or say more insensitive things today than they used to back in the day? No, it was just back in the day. It wasn't broadcast for the world to see for all eternity. You said something stupid at a party, maybe someone said, hey, that was offensive, and then you moved on with your life. Now, 20, 30 years from now, all of a sudden you get put in the public light and, let's go through this guy's life. He has a political position I don't like. He had a comedy special I didn't like. He's an athlete for a team I didn't like. Let's go back and ruin this person's life. It's ridiculous. And if you're young, you should be all against that. Because it will be used against you. Just look at the Me Too movement, which Chapelle was picking on. Yes, it was the woke thing to do. We believe anyone who's an accuser, believe all victims. Until they started accusing some of these very same people, then all of a sudden it was, it's different. Don Lemon, now that there's a lawsuit about him sexually harassing someone, another man. Now it's not believe that victim. You know, the same with there was someone who alleged with Cory Booker. Don't believe that victim or Keith Ellison. Or any of these numerous people that you hardly know that were in the gaming community. You know, I read a story about a guy. He was like the first gamer type guy that got blamed for the Me Too thing. And now he's released all the evidence that showed it was a lie. He had consensual sex with this lady. Yeah, it was an affair. Yeah, he deserves to be shamed for that. But his career's ruined. He's smeared as a rapist. But that's what happens when you join the outrage mob. Eventually it comes for you. You know, look at that clip that South Park kind of aired the other day of the Democratic Socialists of America. Point of personal privilege. Can we stop the chit chat? I'm one of those people that have a very difficult time hearing when other people are chit chat. So can you guys please keep down the chit chat? Excuse me. Point of personal privilege. Can we not say you guys or other gendered pronouns? That's where we're going. Yeah, the Simpsons are a great example, by the way. Did you see the woke bit they had the other day where they had the squad, all the women of the squad singing a little song about how terrible Trump is? Way to go, Grinning. You guys are great. I mean, you had to capitulate with Apu because he was offensive to Indians, apparently. The stuff they say on network TV, by the way, and they'll go with it. Seth MacFarlane from Family Guy and Greening, however you say his name, from The Simpsons. Oh, yeah, they'll give oh, yeah, we're all for the Me Too. And yeah, you know, we're liberal. Oh, yeah, Trump's a terrible person. Yet that microscope hasn't been turned on them yet because they have the right politics. It will eventually. You already saw Seth MacFarlane come out and say, oh, we're going to be more sensitive for, jokes about homosexuality. We're going to be more sensitive. Because someday that mob will turn on him. Just like it did Sarah Silverman. Now, I still defend Sarah Silverman. But how bad do I feel for her? Not really. She'd jump at the opportunity to do this to anyone else. And they have no self-awareness. It's not like when it happens to them, they go, geez, maybe when I was bashing all Trump supporters or bashing Trump, maybe I also was treating them as unfairly as I feel I'm being treated now. And before people say, oh, you're just saying this because you're a Republican, you go back when Ralph Northam, the governor of Virginia, was accused, basically he was one of the people in a KKK hood or blackface in his yearbook. I defended him. I said that, actually the apology was worse. Just the apology was terrible. But I said, I'm sick and tired of digging crap up from people's yearbooks. So, kudos to Dave Chapelle. I guess my point is, good for him for not being worried about angering the SJW types. I hope more comedians start to do the same. Do I think that means these comedians are Trump supporters are all going to vote for Trump? No, absolutely not. They probably still hate Trump. I don't care, though. That's not why I'm watching comedy. Comedy has the ability to bring us all together. If we could all laugh at each other and make fun of each other, then we're less likely to be beating each other with bike locks and ruining friendships over politics and stupid stuff like that. When did we forget to be able to just laugh and take a joke? So, yeah, that's my spiel on Chapelle. I recommend watching it. It might not be your cup of tea. You might not think it's funny. You might think the jokes are too offensive. Regardless, if you feel that way, don't watch it. Don't call for his cancellation. Don't look to see what products he uses and boycotts them. Who cares about all that? Okay, now, kind of on this note. So, the New York Times is actually getting flack from both sides at this point, but primarily from the right. And here's what's happening. They came out and they basically threw a fit because they're like, oh, people connected to Trump are looking into the history of our journalists and coming up with anti-Semitic things they said and reporting them, and that's attacking the free press. This is how... It's so unbelievable when you hear the New York Times say this. Yet, first you have to understand what the New York Times is. The New York Times is supposed to be the epitome of journalism. It's supposed to be, the shining paper on the hill that all other news sources are supposed to reach for. Hard-hitting, heavy journalism, not opinion pieces. It's supposed to be the go-to for, I went for communications in 2002 when I started college. I wanted to be a journalist initially. It only lasted for like a month or two, but that was the pinnacle, right? Oh, the New York Times. And now what have they become? Changing headlines because their readers demand it. Their editor getting a leaked town hall basically admitting, yes, we lied. We have an agenda. We pushed the Russia lie for 2 years. Now we're going to push the Trump racism lie for 2 years. And now this. So they're supposed to be the pinnacle of news. of journalism. And this is what they say. This is how disconnected they are from the average people. And this is true of the media. They're so self-congratulatory. They constantly talk about how important they are. And, the First Amendment. And we're the last bastion between democracy and, the tyranny of evil government. We are so important. We have to hold truth, the powerful to the account. We have to report the truth. We have to be the voice for the little people. And time after time we see it is a lie. They're not journalists. They're mouthpieces for the deep state, for the most powerful people. And the question I've gone back and forth with is, do they know? Do they know that they're literally the opposite of what they're claiming to be? They're actually hurting the free press more than if they would just get out of the press altogether, because now there's an illusion of a free press, which is even worse. And in reality, they're just a mouthpiece for the most powerful, unelected establishment people in the country? Or do they know that they're involved in that? Or do they believe they're garbage, that they're these heroes? And I think it's the latter. I think most of them think they're great, moral, fantastic people. That's how much of a bubble they're in. And it's because of comments like this from the New York Times. So the New York Times has no problem going after people like Breitbart, putting articles up to talk about how to go after Breitbart's business model, reporting on CNN and other journalists going after people that put memes up. They have no problem, anyone who's involved in any type with Trump whatsoever, going after anyone connected to them, to their advertisers, all of this. No problem with that. They never reported when CNN was going to an old woman's house saying, you posted something that Russian bots posted, you shared it, what do you think of that? Shoving a mic in her face. They had no problem when CNN said they were going to dox the person who made the meme with, the WWF meme with the CNN logo getting body slammed. None. They didn't have a problem with any of it. But now all of a sudden, once they are being held to the same criteria that they've held other people to, now it's a huge problem. Now, I just got done telling you, I don't want to see this happen. But it's clear it's not going to end. These groups are going to go after advertisers. They're going to dig up any dirt they can in your life whenever they can, if you don't agree with them. And so the only way that they're going to stop is for the other side to say, okay, then we're going to do the same thing. The exact same thing we'll do. Just like Maxine Waters can go out there and say, and all these Democrats could say, we hope conservatives don't feel comfortable in public. Everywhere you see them, chase them out, yell at them, scream at them. Don't leave them be comfortable eating. Then when the same treatment's done to them, they go, that's not fair, I feared for my life. Oh, these evil Trump supporters. Oh my goodness, they surrounded us. Oh, it was so horrible. That's how racist this country is. And so the very people, the most powerful people, with basically an unlimited budget at the New York Times and these other mass media corporations, they can go after you if you create a meme about Hillary Clinton. They'll come after you, guns a-blazing, dox you. You donate to Trump, they'll support when Democratic politicians out all of your information in public, basically encouraging you to be harassed. They have no problem with that, but as soon as those same tactics are used on them, they're like, oh, this is a theme with the media and with the establishment Democratic Party over and over again. Over and over and over again. Remember when The Guardian thought when Obama in 2012 used a bunch of work with the creators of Facebook and with the leaders of Facebook to get data on people so that they're able to target them with ads. They said that was a genius maneuver, the future of politics. When the Republicans hired a firm to use 1/100th of that data, probably even less than that, to also try to target people with ads, they said, this is criminal. We need people in Capitol. Can you believe they're misusing data like that? When Trump's team wanted to meet with someone that said Russians had dirt in them, that was treason. That was, oh my goodness, reason to impeach. Trump Jr. is going to be in jail. But when Hillary's team wanted to get dirt on Trump from Russians, which he actually did get, no problem. When Trump mean tweets, that's obstruction of justice. Oh, get him out of here. Impeach, and then hold him in trial afterwards. Lock him up. When Hillary's team deletes subpoenaed evidence, oh, then no big deal. When Trump says, hey, I think I have a problem with what Omar is saying here, that's called incitement to violence. But when the Democrats say all Trump supporters are raceless, three-toothed Nazis, ICE workers are working at concentration camps and they're Nazis, That's not incitement to violence. Over and over and over. And they don't get it. They're in such a bubble. They literally think they're better than you. This is what you see with the establishment elite, particularly on the Democratic side, over and over again. Constantly, they think they're better than you. They hate you. You're in flyover country. They don't like you. You're the problem if you check those wrong boxes. You're white, you're a problem. You're Christian, you're a problem. You're born in America, you're a problem. You're a man, you're a problem. We want other people to come. They're better than you. Ask AOC and them. Those immigrants trying to get in, the illegals, they're better Americans than Trump and his supporters. They're better. That's how they truly feel. So are they going to bring those people and put them in their communities? No! They live in gated communities. They think that you're the problem. Put them in your area. Leave them compete with you for the scraps that they give. They'll criticize you. They'll criticize, the middle class and how they live, and they're greedy and they're careless. The Republicans are greedy, careless people. But you go to the most Democrat-controlled cities, go to California, all of these wealthy liberals that know better than you. 2 blocks from their mansions, the most beautiful, expensive houses in the history of the world. 2 blocks, there's fecal matter on the streets. There's homeless living in camps. Syringes everywhere. They don't care. But they're better than you. Trust them. Don't you dare use the tactics on them that they use on you. Don't you dare. They can tell you that your car's bad, that your pickup truck's the problem, that the light bulbs you're using's the problem, that your air conditioning's the problem. They're going to fly in their private jet, though. They'll tell you, the small business owner, you're a greedy pig. You need to be paying your employee $20 an hour. You need to be giving them free health care, even if that means you don't take a dime on them. Meanwhile, the Obamas are buying a $15 million house. They'll say, the Obama will say, oh, isn't there a point where enough money's enough? But he could buy, what how many homes is he on now? Now, what was this guy's career? How did he make his money before he was in politics? Is he an inventor or something? Did he run businesses like Trump? Oh, no. He just got all his money from politics. Somehow he became a millionaire in politics. But he's the good guy. It's those other greedy jerks that are the problem. It's okay for them to dox you. It's okay for them to look in your life. It's okay. Again, I'd say this all the time. You take these situations, you say, what could this lead to? And you give like a slippery slope type argument. We've already seen the end of the slope. Adult racist yelling at children. And the media and all these elites take the adult racist side. Because the child had a wrong color hat on. And he was white. And he was a Trump supporter. And he was pro-life. So screw that kid. That's these people. That's the media. And they're going to tell you over and over, oh, we're this great bastion. And they're right when they talk about the importance of the First Amendment in the media. But they're all liars. Oh, thanks, Pat. Yeah. I'm always wordy, don't get me wrong, but I haven't got to do a video in a while, so I had a lot of little stories that I wanted to cover. So, but yeah, I'm sick and tired of these double standards. And if you're out there, and again, I don't care if you're a Democrat, right? This is the irony. Like when I'm talking about this Google story, I went and I talked I went to a Republican event, and I got to talk to some Congress people and some others. And one of the things, a couple of the people got it, but a lot of people don't get this. When I talk to them, I'm like, do you understand how important this Google story is? That Google could possibly influence upwards of 15 million elections. Think of how, and you see, just as a little aside, right? You see with YouTube and stuff, now you're starting to see left-wing commentators that were silent when it was right-wing people getting censored. Now you're seeing the David Pakmans or the Destinys or the what's the guy, Secular or whatever. You're starting to see them go, oh, we're being demonetized. What's going on? Well, hey, you cheered for it when the establishment was doing it to conservatives, or you were silent. Maybe not all of them. I guess that's not fair to lump them all in. But that's what happens. They're going to censor you too. They're not going to leave it. Look what's happening to Tulsi Gabbard. Well, what's Tulsi? Isn't she progressive enough? Look at her agenda. She's for the reparations argument. She's basically lambasted white supremacy and how bad it is, right? She's for a lot of the minimum wage policy. She's for a lot of the healthcare policies. She's for a lot of the same immigration policy. So why are the Democrats so down on Tulsi Gabbard? What is it that she did? Could it be that she's anti-war? She actually went and talked to Assad? She didn't want to just bomb him like Hillary Clinton? Well, that's enough. Blackball her. Get her out. Now, even though she met the criteria to be in the next debate, all the polls that she had that high enough numbers and it doesn't count. Are we really supposed to believe? We're supposed to believe from these same polls that Tulsi Gabbard's takedown of Kamala Harris took Kamala down 10, 15 points. But it didn't bump Tulsi up even one? Ridiculous. And that's what I tell my friends that are progressives that are on the left. You're never going to get a candidate. There's never going to be anyone that accurately represents you. I've been predicting for weeks now. Elizabeth Warren will win the nomination. Elizabeth Warren will sound really good to the progressives. But the reason she'll win is because even more so than Bernie, the establishment Democrats feel when push comes to shove, she'll listen to them. So when they say go to this war, she'll do it. When they say bail out this banker, she'll do it. And so all of your complaints, you know, all the reasons you voted for Obama, because he was a man of peace. Remember, you were tired of that? Warmonger George Bush. I was against the wars George Bush had too. That's what I'm saying. The Democrats said I changed. How did I change? I was against the wars when Bush was doing it. I was against it when Obama was doing it. Now, where were they? They just had to hold their nose. It's not bad when our guy does it. You'll never see a real person. Take Trump, but it works for basically all non-establishment Republicans. Academia, almost 100% against him. The entertainment industry, almost 100% against him. The mainstream media, 90 to 95% coverage of Trump's negative? All of that, where people get their information, where the public's talking, the public discourse is almost all controlled by anti-Trump, 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 anti-Trump. So where's the last place people could go online? And now we find out, oh, by the way, Twitter and Facebook, they're anti-Trump and they're censoring conservatives and pushing the establishment Democratic opinion. And by the way, Google has the ability to switch 15 million votes. Now, if it was anywhere near fair and the coverage was anywhere near 50-50, how bad would the establishment Democrats be getting crushed? Their message is so bad that they have to totally control the narrative. The worse their messaging gets, the worse the policies they're pushing get, the more they have to tighten their grip and control the narrative. The more they have to shout racism. The more they have to shout Nazi. The more they have to say we need more power to stop from all the white supremacists and all the evil that's Trump supporting and Trump supporters. Because their message is unpalatable. Again, I talk about this. I understand there are people that don't like Trump. Particularly, maybe you don't like his policies, that's fine. But there's a lot that hate him. It's not even the policies. They don't like him as a person. Fair enough. He says a lot of things that make him unlikable. I get that. Maybe you really like his style. Maybe you really hate his style. I can understand both sides of it. I like some of it. I dislike some of it, if I could be honest. Where do the people go that are just like the old traditional establishment or the old traditional Democrat Party voters? Maybe you're a union person, right? Your dad was in a union, you're in a union. You fought hard for your benefits. You fought hard for your wages. Sorry, I'm getting a message here. But you fought hard for all this, right? You don't like Trump. But the Democrats are basically like, oh, we're going to take away all your private insurance that you have for union. And your middle class, we're going to raise your insurance. And we think we should basically have open borders. And we're going to give free healthcare to all those people. And we're going to give free college to everyone. And we're going to have a Green New Deal that says basically you can't have a car in 12 years. It's going to cost trillions, 20, 30 trillion dollars. What are you thinking? Who are you going to vote for? But the establishment Democrats, the more terrible their message get, the more they have to tighten their grip. That's what this story's about from the New York Times. Yes, they could dox you, the individual. They have all the power. You see, then this is what you see. I've heard people like Jordan Peterson and other people talk about this. This is kind of the advent of victimhood culture, right? Where victimhood with cultural Marxism, you're not an individual, you're just a series of groups. So I'm not Rob Noor with my own personal thoughts. I am a white guy, I'm straight, Christian, fat, which is on the other side, right? That makes me a victim. I should be playing up my obesity. Then I could be a victim. Not that it's my fault because I'm lazy. which I'm trying to get better. I've lost a little weight, but nonetheless, that's who I am. I'm just those series of groups. And the greatest currency I can have is victimhood. I can only claim that victimhood from those groups that make me a victim, and if I agree with the Democrats, with the establishment Democrats. That's the only way I could claim that victimhood currency. But that's the big currency. And so what you see happening is you see people in places like Yale and Harvard, the richest, most privileged people in the country, which makes them the richest, most privileged people in the history of the world. Like the top 1% of the 1%. Even in this country. Every advantage. You're in an Ivy League school. And what are they doing? Claiming to be the victim. They're yelling at professors, "This is our home. We don't want people with offensive Halloween costumes. We're tired of the 1%. Just like the media. Some of the most powerful, privileged people, if you work in the mainstream media, in the country. Yet you're complaining. We think as powerful people, we know better than you, so we know when to dox you. We know when to go into your past and dig up things you said from 20 years ago. Even if you're just someone who put a meme up about CNN, we know that's what's best for the country. But don't you dare do that to us. Because they're a different class of person than you. They're better than you. And look, if you're Republican, or even if you're not, even if you hate the Republicans, and you just have any desire to have a non-establishment person or people kind of make decisions to help out the regular people involved in our government, this should scare the crap out of you. This is the number one reason I voted for Trump, by the way. Because I knew, regardless of if Trump did it intentionally or not, he would out just how corrupt our deep state was and the media was. And that's exactly what he's done. In just 2 weeks, we've gone from Google could flip 15 million votes, the New York Times changing a headline because it wasn't anti-Trump enough, the New York Times head editor coming out saying, yeah, we pushed an agenda with the Trump-Russia thing for 2 years, now we need to push Trump-Russia. Or I'm saying Trump racism. The New York Times coming out saying we think it's immoral for people to criticize us and hold us to the same standards they hold other people to. If you have any desire to see any legitimate person run, Republican, Democrat, Green Party, Constitutionalist Party, Libertarian, it doesn't matter. You have to vote against this. You have to get out there and be against this. Do you really think that if the establishment Democrats win, let's just say they win in a landslide, they win the presidency and both houses, do you think anything's going to change? You think the media's going to suddenly get better? You think Google's going to suddenly get better? You think they're not going to capitulate to the Googles and the medias and all of those people? All of these extremely wealthy tech companies that are all their donors? You don't think they're going to go forward with the policies that those groups want? It's funny, they keep saying the Republicans are greedy. Yeah, a lot of them probably are. I don't know. But I know this, any objective analysis shows that the Democratic Party had far higher percentage of the extremely rich donate to them and vote for them than the Republicans did. Just because those rich people go, oh yes, tax me more, so I can find loopholes and put them overseas and hide my money. But yes, tax me more. That doesn't make them moral people. There's nothing holding them back for paying those taxes now. They're all liars. Just like Barack Obama, who said, oh yeah, once you reach so much money, do you really need any more money? Who's buying a $15 million beachfront house? Just like Bernie Sanders, who complained about millionaires, till he bought that third lake house, driving around in that Maserati or whatever he drives around in. Does he need that crap? It's all of them, over and over. Trust us, give us all the power. We hate those greedy rich people. Never mind, we are those greedy rich people. And Thomas Sowell is one of my favorite economists. I saw he put on Twitter the other day. He said, I'll never understand why it's considered greedy to want to keep your own money, but not to want to take others away. Exactly. So, that's what I have on the New York Times story. I guess to go along with that, we'll go with this story with Joe Biden. Now, I've been saying for a while, I don't think Joe Biden's going to cut it. He's not going to be the nominee. And for me, it was easy to see why. Because unless he had one, the polls are garbage anyways, but even at the garbage polls, unless he had enough support that doubled or that was greater than both Bernie and Elizabeth's support together, he's not going to win, because eventually Bernie or Elizabeth will drop out and all of their supporters will coalesce around the other. Not to mention, if you're a Kamala supporter, you're probably more likely to be with Elizabeth Warren or someone than Biden, etc. So basically, Biden needed to be at like 50%. And he's nowhere near that, and it seems that he's falling. And it's clear, I think that one of the things that hurt him was Bob Mueller. Because Biden's reputation is very similar to Mueller's. Elder statesman, genius, kind of a real serious type person. He'll get to the bottom of it. And then you saw Mueller, and it was like the guy had no clue what was in his own report. Old age got to him. You're starting to see that with Biden. The only defense Biden has is he's always kind of been like this. But, he's just losing it. And it's funny, when Trump says something, it's constantly, oh, he's a liar. If it's wrong, it's a liar. When Biden says it, oh, it's just a gap. Or how about this is a brief aside, but remember, who was it? Elizabeth Warren came out and said about Michael Brown being murdered, even though Obama's own Department of Justice under Loretta Lynch investigated and determined that it was a justified shooting. And Warren said, murdered, not murdered, same difference. And the media was like, yep, sounds good. Nothing like stoking more racial animosity, right? The hands up, don't shoot thing that all the media pushed that was a lie, that endangered an actual officer's life, that stood up for a criminal who charged an officer, tried to take his gun, which was backed up not only by evidence of physical nature, but also witness testimony from, by the way, black people. So it wasn't just a whitewash, as people would have you believe. That the Department of Justice under Obama had every incentive to show was a shooting that involved racial animus, but they couldn't. But we're still going to keep that lie alive, because got to prop up that racism, got to create division, right? So on that note, right, Biden, what's he come out? I don't have the exact, I should have done more diligence, but I'd just gotten off work. But I read this story where Biden said that, systemic racism is a white people problem. And I'm just so tired of this crap. It's such absolute garbage. I'm just so tired of it. I'm so tired of it. Look, I'm tired of it on both sides. I got in an argument, well, not an argument, but a big discussion on here last live stream I did about how I have no connection. I don't care about the white race. I don't care. I care that it be treated fair as every other race, but I don't identify. That to me, it's so far down. My genetic makeup is so far down on things I care about. It just is. However, you can't, when you allow the mainstreaming of attacking a certain group of people, whether it be based on race, based on gender, based on religion, that's when the problems get even worse. We talk about white nationalism. Yes, you might have a psycho that goes out and kills people that's a white nationalist. Yes, there are certainly some out there, but it's a handful. The KKK has less than 1,000 people in it. But I can go to college campuses and listen to mainstream professors talk about the problem of whiteness or the problems of the patriarchy. That's when real danger occurs. Because you marginalize people. Don't believe me? Well, why don't you go to Rotterdam and ask them how that worked out? Thousands of young girls raped, gang raped, over a 3-decade period. Rotterdam, Telford, all these other places in the UK. Why? Because the politicians and the police were afraid to say anything because it was white girls being raped by people of Pakistani origin. They didn't want to be called racist. Now those thousands of girls have to live with those scars the rest of their life. Their families have to live with that. And why? Because this garbage narrative, separating people based on race, absolutely ridiculous. And if you'd say the counter, you can't. And I never would. I constantly talk about how I want things to go better in the inner city and for the black community. And I think that actually the establishment way of doing it is purposely keeping them down, is what I think. And if we treated everyone as equal as possible, that those, after generations, we'd see those populations in those cities, in those areas of the world doing much better. But when you constantly say you're a victim, you can't achieve because you're a victim because the world owes you something. Oh, it's those horrible white people. It's their problem. Oh, it's men. They're keeping you down. It's men's problem. They're the bad people. It's a disservice to the white people, to the men, to the women, to the black people, to the Christians, to the Muslims, whatever. When you judge people just based on their group and say that one's good or one's bad based on that group, you're doing everyone involved a disservice. Every single group. Yes, if you're white, you say, I'm sick and tired of this. But what happens? There's also an advantage in a sick way. You get used to it. You get used to having to defend your own existence. You get used to having been told, you're going to be told you've had, no matter how, you could be born and your mom could die in childbirth and your dad could have serious health issues. You could live in chronic poverty. And you could bust your hump all through school and go to college and work a full-time job to pay your way through college and help support your dad and help support your parents. And you're still going to be looked at as privileged. You know there's no use whining though, so you just keep working. In some sick ways, that's an advantage. And it's the disadvantage to those communities that are being told you're a victim because they never feel the need to say, they always feel like, well, it's not my fault, it's not my fault. Go ahead. If you have kids, tell your kids. Oh, you failed, it's not your fault, it's your teacher's fault. See if their grades get better after that. Oh, you didn't make the starting football team? It's not your fault, it's the coach's fault. See if they work hard in practice to get better then for the next year. I'm sick and tired of this crap. We have both sides. If you're a white identitarian, if you're someone who hates white people, if you're a feminist, all of these groups, what are we really talking about, right? Like in debate, one of the things we talk about is links and impacts. In order for something to be important, it has to have an impact. So let's say I said to you, hey, your school board's plan's actually going to cost, 15 janitors their jobs. So you have to quantify, well, what does that mean? Well, these janitors have families and it would be bad and blah, blah, blah. You have to give an impact to that. But you could also say, yes, but there's maybe a further extension out to that impact. Maybe the reason we're losing 15 janitor jobs is because those janitors are actually going to become, construction people in whatever. It's not the best example, but you see what I'm saying. When it comes to things like diversity, this is the easiest way to put it. Why is diversity our strength? What is so great about diversity? Well, it's because diversity of thoughts and actions lead to the cream rising to the top. If you have an entire room of people that all agree, then you're more likely to make a mistake. You're more likely not to be able to understand opponents' arguments or different ways of thinking. So the diversity is our strength means we want a diverse group of thinking. What are some of the ways we could get to a diverse group of thinking? Well, maybe some of our immutable characteristics, if they're different, would lead to diverse ways of thinking. Such as, maybe I was born in a rural area, maybe you were born in an urban area. That could lead to diversity of our thoughts. Maybe I'm white, maybe you're black. That could lead to diversity of thoughts. Because the thought is, if you come from a different background, you probably have a different way of thinking of things. But not necessarily. It's the diversity of thought that matters. Just like you might see someone who's very tall and you say, that person's good at basketball. Well, not necessarily. At the end of the day, if you're assembling a basketball team, you want people that are good at basketball. You don't just stop at, we want tall people. That is a category that could lead to the benefit that you want at the end. The same is true when we talk about systemic problems in this country. Poverty, illness, single-parent families, people being incarcerated, right? All that crap. Those are problems we can say we want to solve. Hunger, okay? We want to solve all that, right? So how do we go about solving that? You say, well, what are some of the things that could lead to that? Well, maybe it was being born in a certain community. Maybe it's being born a certain race. Maybe it's being born with a certain immigration status. Okay, but at the end of the day, it's the damn poor people that we want to help. Their skin color doesn't matter. That's just a possibility to lead to that. And so what happens when you just focus on the skin color or the gender is you alienate all the people that are in that situation that you want to help that don't fit into those categories. And so we end up with things like somehow the poor homeless person who happens to be a white man on the street is more privileged than Barack Obama. That's the insanity that we get when you just look at the groups. That's why the United States was I say it all the time. What makes the United States the greatest country in the world? Because it was focused on the individual. Yes, we're all going to engage in stereotypes. We can't help it. We're humans. That's what we do. It's probably evolutionary. You didn't have time, to see a lion and be like, now wait a minute, I don't want to stereotype that lion. It's possible. Could be a friendly lion. I've seen The Lion King. You had a stereotype. That thing thinks I'm food, I'm running. Or I'm fighting back. We have a stereotype of all kinds of things. You had a stereotype of outside tribes. You were worried about them. That made sense evolutionarily. I've never been to China. I have a stereotype of what a Chinese city looks like. But the key is you're willing to adjust those stereotypes. You don't act on them. You don't act with prejudice because of them. There are stereotypes, for example, that Asian people are really good at math. If I meet an Asian person who's not really good at math, I'm not going to assume something's wrong because the stereotype must be right. I'll laugh at myself and go, there's stupid me buying into some stereotype. I should know better. Treat people as individuals. But instead of doing that, we have the establishment Democrats because they know it's a key to getting power. Just like Karl Marx knew, right? The reason we saw that Marxism failed. We saw what happened. In the name of helping poor people, hundreds of millions of poor people were starved to death. Incrementally, everything was justified. It was all about more power for a few to help the poor, but that was just an excuse. And so it didn't work when we were just talking economics, so now we'll talk about it with race or with gender. And we'll still talk about it with class or with sexual preference or with religion or with height or body types. And it's just so stupid. So now we have all of the leaders in the Democratic Party running for president are pushing this racial division crap. And it will never get better. How can you explain that 50 years after the war on poverty, after things like the end of Jim Crow, after the civil rights movement, things are worse in many inner city black neighborhoods than they were back then? How do you explain that? I talk about this all the time. In the 60s, a Democrat, Patrick Moynihan, put together a report that said it was a national embarrassment and travesty, emergency, that 25% of black children were born out of wedlock. Because every statistical study shows, almost every, I guess I shouldn't be hyperbolic, that one of the number one factors in determining success in life is whether you're in a two-parent household. And so if we have 25% of people growing up in a single-parent household, that's a really bad thing. So, okay, we saw the problem. We initiated the war on poverty. All of these all of these inner city people like Larry Elder say, I was in the inner city. I remember people knocking on my parents' door, my neighbor's door, saying, hey, if there wasn't a man in the house, the government would give you all kinds of money. So predictably, what happened? Well, now the number in the inner city is like 70% of children born in single-parent households. And I'm not judging. I say this all the time. If I was someone who was born in the inner city, I wouldn't have made it out. I know I wouldn't have. I know I would have played the victim. So those people in the inner city that actually make it out, they're some of the best Americans around. That against all odds still refuse to just say, I'm a victim. They went out there and achieved. And I say that regardless if they agree with me politically or not. It's an amazing thing. I didn't have those challenges. I doubt I could have survived under those challenges and been successful. But instead of saying, geez, focusing on these issues like it was a skin color thing. By the way, the numbers, even with other races, with whites, it's up around 50% now. The point is just, when you focus on the categories that could possibly lead to what you're trying to solve, you don't actually solve the problem. We all pat ourselves in the back and say, diversity. There's a room full of people that looks like a rainbow. Men and women and trans and gays and bis and whites and blacks, browns and Asians and Jews. We did it. We'll call this place Google. Oh, but you all have to think alike. We'll call this place academia. Don't you dare think different. You look different. That's enough. Oh, we want to solve poverty. We'll just have more affirmative action. We'll blame whiteness. We'll blame the patriarchy. Study after study shows that when you do this, when they go into, they do diversity training at businesses, it doesn't actually increase sympathy or empathy with minorities. What it does is it lowers sympathy and empathy for poor whites. Because you start to think, wow, that white guy, he has every advantage in the world. Why isn't he doing well? What a bum. He sucks. It doesn't solve anything. Meanwhile, then what happens? Do you ever notice all these people, the few white supremacists you actually see or white nationalists, not many of them coming from wealthy backgrounds or well-educated backgrounds, are they? Let's go back to our example of Rotherham. You know, Tommy Robinson and them, they joined the EDL. All the EDLs, they have racists in them. If your daughter got raped, gang raped, and you went to the police, and the police charged your daughter, who was 13, for drinking, and did nothing, and so then you took matters into your own hand and got a couple of your friends, and you went to that house where adult men gang raped your daughter, and the police arrested you, what would you do? Along comes this group and says, we got your back. They hate you for who you are. They hate you for your skin color. They hate you for your what they consider low class. It's just like being in prison. You might go in, you're not a racist, you don't want to join a gang, but if you keep getting beat up by one gang, you're probably going to join the other gang. Does that mean we shouldn't judge people that are in racist groups? No, I'm not saying that at all. What I am saying is, when you continue to marginalize people, don't be confused when they end up then joining groups, and again, I've heard Jordan Peterson and others say this, and it just makes sense. When you have one side that wants to play the identity politics game over and over, don't be surprised when the other side says, yes, we want to play that game as well. And so when you look at the Richard Spencers of the world and you ask them, I've seen them say it, when you're recruiting people, what's the number one thing that helps you recruit? They say groups like Black Lives Matter, groups that blame whiteness and the patriarchy for everything. Of course. And then in turn, Richard Spencer's group, guess what? He's the number one advertisement for those groups. And so they feed off each other. But I just can't believe it. We're in 2019. We're talking about reparations. We're talking about whiteness being a problem. Now, in fairness, I talked to a friend of mine here. I did a live stream, Basic Thoughts, and, he defined whiteness as something different. I still don't buy that definition, though. His definition of whiteness is something to do with this. Well, whiteness was just like a class or a prestige. For example, the Irish and the Italians were not considered white at one point. And so when we say whiteness, we're not talking about the color white. We're talking about that idea of prestige. But if that's the truth, then Obama has whiteness, right? Then Al Sharpton has whiteness. Then Jay-Z has whiteness. Oprah has whiteness. Michelle Obama has whiteness, right? They have all the prestige. They're allowed to vote. They get to make all the decisions that control the public narrative. They have mass amounts of wealth that allow them to influence the country. Well, no, it's still something different. Okay, what's that something different? Because it's used as a euphemism to blame white people, is what it is. And this is coming from someone who literally has had discussions with, I don't even care that I'm white. I don't care. I would be vehemently against this if the same argument was against Asian people. Because it screws everyone up. It means we never solve real problems. We're bickering at each other. It's an easy way to get votes. It'd be like, I'm a Pittsburgh Pirates fan, And they suck. They never spend money. They're just terrible. And so if I start complaining about the Pirates and the Pirates ownership goes, yeah, but the problem is, it's the Yankees. They're the problem. Look how much they spend. That's the freaking problem. And I'm like, yeah, screw the Yankees. Meanwhile, Bob Nutting, that owns the Pirates, is laughing all the way to the bank because now I'm still supporting him. Even though it's him that's not spending the money. I could get just as fired up about the Pittsburgh Pirates as I can the politics. So, yeah, Biden, he's not going to win, but just, and the reason I bring this up, too, when talking specifically about Biden, remember, he's the moderate. This is the moderate right here. This is Joe from Scranton. He's going to go into flyover country. He's going to go back to Ohio, Michigan. He's going to go to these old mills, and he's going to get these workers on his side. Unless you're white, then you're part of the problem. You're part of systemic racism. As long as we keep shouting systemic racism, I'm sure things will get better. I'm sure that's the problem. Do you ever notice it's the people with the power that are talking about systemic racism or systemic sexism? Like, I have to listen to Hollywood tell me how systemic sexism's rampant. Meanwhile, everyone and their brother in Hollywood's getting charged with rape or some sort of violence against women. And all, like, you know, all these women, they knew what was going on and said nothing about it. Like Meryl Streep signing, oh, leave Roman Polanski back in the country. Sure, he anally raped a 14-year-old girl, but that was forever ago. It's, you know, what Whoopi Goldberg said. It's not rape. Those are the people lecturing me and you about treatment of women. Just like these people that are lecturing us about systemic racism, guess what? You are the system. So if there's systemic racism, you're part of it. Resign. Get out then. I'm not racist. Put me in. Put in the average Joe on the street that's not racist. It's just working at a factory that doesn't have the luxury of making hundreds of thousands of dollars and then somehow buying $15 million houses when we're out of office. We don't have that luxury. We're too busy working with people of all races and religions and sexual preferences. We don't have time to sit around and blame, oh, it's systemic racism. Yeah, the Yankees suck, don't get me wrong. I'll still complain about them, but all right. So probably the most important story of the week, though it's so frustrating, my head's going to explode if I think about it, is more on the Epstein debacle. Remember, the reason I think the Epstein thing's such a big deal is there are two, what's the word I'm looking for? Situations which could shed light to the average person who's not a nerd like me that's sitting around reading this stuff all the time, is to just how corrupt outside unelected actors are in influencing our country and what's going on in them. And that was the Russia hoax, which I'll get to in a little bit here, and the Epstein case. The problem with the Russia hoax case is much of this information is available, but it's very different. It's like the banker bailout, right? Where me and you know, if I'm just talking to you person to person, and I just say this facts, hey, these bankers knew they were doing something very shady, probably illegal, but certainly risky. They gambled and lost, and now your taxpayers are going to bail them out because they're saying, well, we're too big to lose. Everybody knows that was garbage. Everyone. But when you get the intellectual class in and they're like, well, actually, if we don't bail them out, then, you know, GDP will lower by this much and we'll have to have the federal lower interest rates and we'll have to do this. So actually, you as the American people, you're saving money by giving all your tax dollars to these wealthy bankers. That's how they end up. It's the same with this Russia situation. It's really clear. It's easy to make the situation understandable, but to me, but that's because I follow it all the time. So when you start talking to a person, they're just like, I don't know. I don't really care about Russia. That's what they say. But it is a big story, as I'll get to in a minute. But the Epstein case was easy. Everybody knows that pedophilia is one of the most, and child sex trafficking is about the most heinous crime available. And if there are establishment people involved in this from both sides, and they're doing the most heinous thing possible, that means they're doing everything less heinous than that as well. Or they're at least capable of that. Which means the pedophile, the child sex trafficker that's running the country, they don't give a lick about you, the voter. They don't care about your factory job. They don't care about climate change. They don't care about immigration. They don't care about the Second Amendment. They're monsters. And if those people are involved at some of the top levels of the world's governments, then it's a huge problem. People understand that. And so what happens predictably? Well, it's all going to get buried, isn't it? So we were told the guy tries to kill himself or he claims was attacked. But they take him off suicide watch. They don't even have a camera on him. And now the story this week is, well, at least one of the... So here's his cell, right? Here's the cell. So there's no camera facing in. But surely there's cameras in the hallways, right? And everyone said, that's okay. We'll get the evidence from the cameras in the hallways. We'll get it. That's what people told me. Because I've been complaining how much of a sham this is. We'll get them from the hallway. Now what's the story that came out? At least one of the cameras in the hallway was malfunctioning. And the video's not usable. Really? Who would have thought? Just another coincidence. If you're out there and you're a victim of Epstein, would you come forward? They got to him in prison. They're so powerful that they either sent someone in to murder him or made people in the FBI, U.S. Marshal Service, and this prison look the other way while he killed himself. So you think they're going to look out for you? You think anything's actually going to be done about this? Not a chance. Not a chance at all. Oh, it was a suicide and there was incompetence and we got rid of a couple of the people, the person running the jail and a couple of the guards we got rid of, but, they were tired. They have faulty equipment. You know what? Trump should have invested more money in prisons. That's what the problem is. I'm just so sick and tired. Remember the D.C. madam? She served all these politicians in the United States with prostitutes, was going to come forward about it, and killed herself. Isn't it convenient how that happens? And what did I say the day this story comes out? Go watch my video. I was pretty heated about it. Did like an hour video the morning that Epstein died. And I said people will be pissed for 2 or 3 days, and then Trump will tweet something, and away we go. Everyone will forget all about it. And what's exactly happened? And it's me too. Don't get me wrong. Never forget these stories. Never forget the Epstein story. Never forget the Russia hoax story. Never forget the Kavanaugh story. And how not just low-level people, not just random YouTubers like me that are on the left, the most powerful people in the Democratic Party told you that the entire foundation of this country's legal system of innocent until proven guilty was wrong, and based on your genitals and your political party, you were guilty until proven innocent. They ran unconfirmed stories calling Judge Kavanaugh a gang rapist. They showed pictures of him coaching his girls' basketball team and said he shouldn't be allowed to coach. They said that Christine Blasey Ford, it was her truth that mattered, even if it wasn't the truth. Even though she couldn't remember any of the details. They said he was guilty, he wasn't allowed there. Never forget that. Never forget Lindsey Graham when he said, "You people want power in the worst way, and I hope you never get it." If they do that to Kavanaugh, what do they think they'd do to someone without power like me and you? Never forget the Covington Catholic kids situation, where adult racists screamed at kids for over an hour. And then a Native American man said, "Yeah, those adult racists are making a lot of sense." So he got in a kid's face with a drum. And the media went nuts about the kid. Even after they found out that the kids were getting death threats and the story was wrong, they still went back to the school from 6-7 years ago, trying to find other bad things that some student at that school could have did. So as this election keeps coming up, those are the types of things I'm going to be talking about, in addition to the specific policies and things like that. Don't forget those things. The person that's willing to lie and call you a gang rapist, it doesn't matter if you think their policy's okay on healthcare. They're corrupt. They're tearing the fabric of the country apart. If they get their way, and if this crap works, then every election from here on out will just be the FBI, the CIA will spy on who they want, they'll push who they want, the media will push the candidate they want, that candidate will be chosen, that candidate, like Chuck Schumer said, will have to think from ever criticizing the FBI or the intel community because they'd find 6 ways at Sunday and getting back at them. They'll call you a racist, even if you're a kid, if you disagree with them. They'll say you're a gang rapist if you run and you're against them. And if you could out them, if potentially you have any evidence on you, you'll just mysteriously die, like Epstein. But that's cool because Prince Andrew came out and said, "Hey, I didn't know any of this crap about Epstein, so good enough for me, right? We'll wash our hands of that." Unbelievable. It's unbelievable. And I'll say, before I go on to the next story, I'll say this. My message to the Republicans is this. And when I say that, I know a lot of people that watch me don't like either party, and that's fine. But this message goes to you too. If you want to win, or if you want to stop these corrupt people from winning, you have to get out there and fight. I don't mean physically. In fact, I'm a huge opponent of any political violence at all. But you need to let people know. Be talking about this stuff. Let them know how they're being brainwashed, how all of the narrative that's coming at them is coming from one side. And they feel totally morally righteous in doing so. Those people controlling that narrative. If the Republicans keep playing defense on this, well, I guess maybe Trump shouldn't have tweeted. Well, blah, blah, blah. Here's how you respond to this. I'm not a racist. Stop calling me a racist. If you're so focused on race, perhaps it's you that's the racist. Who's got a backbone left in the Republican Party or in the non-establishment Democratic Party? You're just going to listen to the racial hucksters like Al Sharpton call you a racist or a Nazi all the time? Enough! Why was I talking about Dave Chappelle at the beginning? One, because I do think comedy is important. But second, that is exactly the platform or the exact type of way to handle the situation. I don't care what you think. I'll make fun of trans people because I don't mind trans people, is what Dave Chappelle says. I'll make fun of poor white people because I like poor white people. I'll make fun of the Me Too movement, but I respect women. Now in politics, it's not comedy, so your goal's not to make fun of. But you're not in the back foot the whole time saying, oh, I promise, I'm not a racist, I'm not a sexist, I'm not a racist, I'm not a sexist. Oh, you said the El Paso shooter was for the wall. Well, I guess I'm not really for the wall. Ridiculous. And if the Republicans can't put people up that are more vocal, where are my local politicians? Where are the people? I'm in Pennsylvania. There's some. I've met some great congressmen. Why aren't they on the microphone every day? YouTube has the ability to swing 15 million votes. These people just shouting racism, controlling all these narratives. They're going to lose. This is a unique time in history. Even if you hate Trump. And that's fine. Even if you think Trump is part of the establishment. That's fine too. The important part is the establishment thought Trump might not be part of them. And so they outed themselves. With this Epstein crap, with the Kavanaugh crap, with the Covington crap, and with the Russia hoax crap. That's so blatant. So, real quick on the Russia situation, Joe, how do you say his name? Joe DeGenova? I can never pronounce it wrong. I never pronounce it right, but he's been pretty good on he's a former lawyer. He's been pretty good on the Russia hoax stuff, I think. Now, I say this, take it with a grain of salt, but the reports are he was doing a radio interview where he said that he's talked to people that have seen the IG's conclusions. For those of you who don't know, the Inspector General's looking at the Russia investigation, and he'll be wrapping up. The report will probably come out in mid-September. Could be longer, but that's what they're predicting. But part of the process of getting that report out is you have to show the relevant people in Congress, in the intel agencies, in the executive branch, like the Department of Justice under Trump, and then they'll determine what could be released. Yeah, DeGenova. There we go. DeGenova. But, so he says he's heard from people that the IG report will say that all 4 FISA applications against Carter Page were illegal. All 4. Carter Page, if you remember, was the person in the dossier who was said to have gone to Russia, met with people in exchange for 20% of a Russian energy firm, was going to help basically make Trump a stooge of Putin's, and they were going to steal the election together. Well, it turns out that never happened. But they got a FISA warrant to spy on Carter Page as a result of this. Page was never charged with any crime. Every 3 months, I believe, the FISA warrant had to be renewed. So it was renewed 3 times. That means 4 times this FISA warrant was taken to a FISA judge. If these terms are confusing, which I know the Russia thing could be confusing, we have so like if you're a foreigner and we think that you're spying on the United States, our government's allowed to use the CIA or other intel agencies to investigate you and spy on you. But if you're an American, there has to be an extra step because you're protected under our Bill of Rights and our Constitution. So, for example, you have the right to privacy, you have the right to free speech. And those rights can't be violated unless there's a good reason to think that you're some sort of spy. And so to do that, you have to go to a Foreign Information Surveillance court, the FISA courts. The FISA courts, then, the idea is whichever agency's going, in this case it'd be Comey's FBI, is supposed to give truthful testimony to these courts that then make a decision on whether or not you're allowed to spy on the person that you're at, the American you're asking. In this case, it was Carter Page, and they wanted to wiretap him, amongst other things, send actual spies. So, what happens is the dossier that we now know as crap was used for a substantial part of getting this warrant. Now, there are some cases, and Joe says this himself, that actually they tried to get the FISA warrant on Carter Page. It was denied, which is almost unprecedented because it's like 98.9% of all requests to the FISA courts are accepted, which, short of Trump, Hillary, any names, that's absurd. We shouldn't have a rubber stamp court that could violate Americans' rights like that. But nonetheless, even aside from that, the fact that one would have got denied is incredible. And then the dossier was added, and then it was accepted. Well, if the dossier was a lie and the FBI knew it was never verified, that means that they withheld information to the FISA court, which means that the surveillance warrant was illegal. Which means the Obama administration's intel agency spied on Trump's campaign illegally, based on illegal information. Now, what does this mean? Well, let's first... I've talked about this at great length, but there were basically 3 major cases that were talked about, all verbatim, 2 years, breathlessly, about the Russia investigation that made it a big deal. First we were told Carter Page in this dossier. Well, once it came out that the dossier was paid for by Hillary and never verified, then it switched to, oh no, it was the start of the investigation was George Papadopoulos. Supposedly, he got drunk, told a Hillary Clinton supporting friend, Australian diplomat Alexander Downer, that, hey, some Russians have some dirty emails on Hillary. Boom, that's reason to spy on Trump's campaign, apparently. And then you have the Trump Tower meeting. In all 3 cases, there are incredible shadiness. So, for example, the Trump Tower meeting, we know that the lawyer he met was actually a client of Fusion GPS, the firm that was paid for by Hillary. We know that that lawyer, Veselnitskaya, met with Fusion GPS's owner, Glenn Simpson, the day before and the day after the Trump Tower meeting. But Glenn Simpson says she failed to mention that she met Trump in Trump Tower, which defies all reasonable standards. We know that that lady was given a special exemption to come in, even though she was barred from the United States by the Obama DOJ, Loretta Lynch. So we know that that situation's shady. We also know that Trump Jr. walked out of the meeting, nothing was given. Second case, Papadopoulos. We know for a fact that spies were sent, such as Halper and a woman by the name of Azra Turk, which is a pseudonym, was sent to spy on Papadopoulos. They kept asking about this Russian information. We know that Joseph Mifsud, who was the person who started the whole ball rolling, as claimed by Mueller, he's the one who told Papadopoulos, we got this dirt, or that the Russians have this dirt. And Mifsud was interviewed by the FBI and lied 3 times to them. And he was never charged. And Mifsud's lawyer said actually he was operating based on as an agent of Western intelligence, which means the entire start of the investigation was Western intelligence going to this professor saying, get in connection with this Papadopoulos guy. Spread this lie to him that Russians have dirt. Then when you tell Papadopoulos that and he tells someone else Russians have dirt, bam, we got our excuse to spy on him. That's the second case. Now we have the third case. Fake dossier paid for by Hillary Clinton used to spy on Trump's campaign. And if it's true, which we should wait until the IG report comes out to see if it's true. But if it's true that the IG said this is illegal, that's 3 for 3 of Obama's administration and the intel community, his Department of Justice and FBI, working in conjunction with people, intelligence assets in the UK, and Alexander Downer from Australia, to spy on President Trump and his campaign. And people say, why is that a big deal? Well, everybody knows that, right? How many Pulitzer Prizes were given over Watergate? With a couple bumbling fools leafing through evidence in a hotel. Now imagine if Nixon, instead of sending a couple bumbling fools, had sent the entire weight of the FBI, CIA, worked with UK intelligence assets, Australian intelligence assets, to totally spy on his opponent. It is the biggest political scandal in the history of this country. Just like Chuck Schumer said, you can't dare go against the intel agencies or they'll find 6 ways from Sunday of getting back at you. Them and the fact that their allies in the mainstream media, academia, and the entertainment industry control the narrative so much. Some reports show, despite Mueller showing there was no connection, no crimes of conspiracy with any Russian and any American citizen, let alone Trump-connected person, in trying to affect the 2016 election. Over 50% of Democrats still believe that Trump's a Russian agent. That's how powerful they are. They totally spied on him. They assumed they had hubris. They assumed Hillary had it in the bag. I believe they were spying on Trump. One, so they could know exactly what he was going to say. Second, to try to dig up more actual dirt on him that could be used against him. And third, anything they dug up, so once he lost the election, if he wanted to say, hey, I got screwed over, this is all the crappy stuff Hillary's team did, they would be able to go to him and be like, we're going to make your life a living hell. We'll investigate you till the end of time. Here's all the information we already have. Shut your mouth. But little did they expect Trump would win. Now the stuff's out in public. But you wouldn't know it. The media doesn't cover it. In fact, the media tells people like me, fat guys sitting on a chair, don't you look into it. How dare you criticize the FBI? That's un-American. You're hurting America. They could call Trump a Nazi, a racist, all of this crap. That's not hurting America. But pointing out crimes that the FBI committed under the Obama administration, that's hurting America somehow. Now, the last thing I want to say about this Dejanova clip, I hope I pronounced it right. He says, and I wish I had it linked, but he says at the end of the interview, and this infuriates me to no end. He says, now listen though, even though it's going to show all these crimes that were committed and all this crap that was illegal, don't expect Barr to actually make arrests. Don't expect him to actually charge people because, it's politically contentious. It's more about just getting the information out there and restoring faith in the FBI and the intel agencies. But it's hard to actually prosecute people. I'm sorry. I'm going on record right now. I support Trump as well as anyone I know. Sure, I go against him when I feel that that he does something I don't like. But I support him all the time. If Trump and his man Barr show crimes that were committed and decide not to prosecute them, they deserve everything they get from these groups. Nothing will change. These groups will continue to go after Trump. They'll continue to go after, and maybe Trump thinks, well, if I don't go after him, they'll finally like me. I don't care. I will not support Trump if that's the case. The only way to restore faith in these agencies is to finally end the double standard. It's okay for them to lie to Congress. It's okay for them to lie. It's okay for them to do this and that and spy on Americans. No, unacceptable. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. But I've been skeptical all along. The evidence is there, just like it was with Hillary. Never forget. They'll try to, well, did Hillary have intent to have this server at home? Was it intent to hide the information from people? Hillary's team deleted subpoenaed evidence. That is a crime in black and white. They were not charged. They were all given. Can you think of any other? Have you ever watched a Law and Order episode? Have you ever watched a Cops episode? Any show about the police? Have you ever seen them say, okay, here's what we do. We're trying to bring down this criminal enterprise. So let's go in, give everyone immunity, smash all the evidence for them, and then see if they want to say anything. Or instead, do they do like they did to Trump's team? We'll find a low-level guy, charge him with the crimes we could prove, turn the screws, and hope he sings and gets someone higher up the food chain. That's how they do it. They never give everyone immunity and smash the evidence. But that's what they did with Hillary's team. And we're just supposed to say, oh, it's okay. The public knows. Well, the public doesn't know. Because the media doesn't do their job. Because they're a mouthpiece for these same people. So's academia. So's Silicon Valley. So's the entertainment industry. That's why you have, how many people in the entertainment industry, we're going to do a dramatic reading of the Mueller report. Which says nothing. Which proves that Trump was innocent of the original charge. But they're going to have a dramatic reading of that. Any dramatic readings of Comey talking about Hillary deleting subpoenaed evidence? Nope. No one cares about that. Even though that's a more cut and dry crime. If people don't go down, if they're not charged criminally, nothing will change. Why would it? It's the same with the bankers, the bailing out the bankers. All these bankers did all this corrupt crap in 2018. No one went to jail. Do you think it's going to end? So let's see. The upside is they all got filthy rich, and then when they started to lose money, the government bailed them out, and they continued to be filthy rich. The downside is, nothing. No one got punished. But I'm sure they learned their lesson. Same here with these intel groups. So you mean to tell me they got away with this? It was all a lie from the get-go. Basically treason. At least sedition. Illegally spying on Americans. Illegally spying on a presidential campaign. Smearing them with leaks and stuff for 2 years. Over 2 years at this point. 3 years. And, oh well, shame on you. Just don't do it again. It's unbelievable. Why are people outraged? And again, I'll tell you why people aren't outraged. Let's go back to that example. Thousands of girls raped. Underage girls in Telford and Rotterdam. Now, you're told now, in the UK, they'll say, well, they're starting now, finally, after 3 decades, we're starting to make some arrests from these rapists, so we're on it. Let's assume they get every rapist, okay? Which is obviously not going to happen, but let's assume that's the case. They're arresting the police that knew about it? They're arresting the politicians that knew about it? If you were a mayor of a town, or you were a member of parliament, or you were a sheriff of the police, and you knew that thousands of girls were being raped for over 3 decades, and you purposely covered that up and went after the parents of the girls, don't you think you should be in jail? Don't you think you should be held accountable for your crimes? You don't think you have culpability? Of course they do. Yet where are the riots? Where are the people demanding justice? Instead, when you do have a guy, even if he seems unlikable like Tommy Robinson, who's trying to point this crap out, they're cheering for him going to jail. If only they'd put as much energy in actually getting the people who allowed rapes to occur in prison as they did the guy calling them out. So I have no doubt, none, that you're not going to see public outrage. Oh. 1 second, it's saying my stream's down. Am I back? Okay. I think I'm back now. Anyways. So yeah, that's what I have to say about that. There's only 2 more things that I had to talk about, which I'll get through real quick. Because I don't know what's going on with my... Normally my internet connection's pretty good, but... Anyways, the first is, this was just kind of coming out, and I have to read the details of this, but I do think that it could be somewhat good news, which is Boris Johnson has requested, and I believe the Queen's accepted, to disband Parliament until Brexit takes place. Now, I'm not sure all the legal ins and outs and what sorts of challenges could be issued to this, but what's going to be said is that this is anti-democratic. It is not. The people voted. Their will was never enacted. And so Parliament's the impediment to it. And so the Queen should act to make sure that the people's will was enacted. And then if they want to have another referendum after it's been enacted for a couple of years, that's up to them. Why is it that every time there's a vote that goes against the globalist, we need to rethink this? Remember the Libson Treaty with Ireland? They voted against it. Now you need to vote again. What a hell of a system, right? We'll have a vote. If our side loses, we vote again. If our side wins, well, that's the will of the people, and then it's enacted. So I applaud this. We'll see what happens. I'll remain to be skeptical until the Brexit actually happens. But I do think that it should happen. And I think that not just because, the UK's an ally of the United States, but just for free peoples anywhere. I'm a fan of the more localized government, the better. The fact that the EU is a system where a bunch of elites sit in Brussels and make laws that supersede the laws people vote for in their own countries is absurd. And it is a pattern You know, we used to have people like William Cooper and even Alex Jones would talk about this, right? Kind of this idea of one world government, where you would have an Asian union, a European union, and an American union. And then from there you'd coalesce into just basically dissolving nation states. That's what I believe people want. That's what, when you talk about the deep state, the people with real power in this country, you know, the people running Google and places like that, they don't want to have to deal with different countries. You think Google likes the bad press they get? Well, to operate in China, they have to kiss the Chinese government's butt. But then that gets some bad publicity when that's released. How are they going to feign to be, oh, we're LGBT rights, oh, we're all for feminism, oh, we're all for free speech, and woo, we're super woke in the United States. And then in China, like, yes, we're with you, Xi. We'll crack down on anyone you want. We'll have a separate internet for you. We'll, you know, to help your dictatorial government. Hard to do that. They want a one government so that they're able to enact their policies. Where in the United States is the most globalist governments? Well, it's in the big cities. Probably San Francisco, LA. Those are the places that you would look that are most like what the globalist world would look like. Where you have extremely wealthy people that are running the entire local show. Everything that gets done there is because of Google or Silicon Valley, right? And these cities in California. All these extremely wealthy places. And then just extreme poor that are all dependent on those wealthy living all around. It's feudalism. It's the king in his castle up in the hill and everyone else is peasants down below. And you're just waiting for the king to throw you some scraps. That's why they're all for socialism. They know how to wipe out the middle class. The middle class is the big impediment to these organizations taking over the world. And I don't mean like shadow sitting in, you know, black rooms smoking cigars. It's just obvious. They want more power. They want more control. That's what Amazon wants. That's what Google wants. That's what Facebook wants. The easiest way to do that is just to have one government. It's easier to influence just that one government. If you don't have a middle class, it's much easier to deal with that. Yes, you give the people the scraps. Vote for us. We'll give you free food, the bread and circuses. You're getting the bread from us. But if you don't have the power that the middle class has, where even though as individuals, members of the middle class can't challenge a Google or a Facebook or any of these large industries or, you know, shadowy political groups, collectively they could. So if you wipe that out and you just have the rich and the poor, that's it. It's easy then to control the poor. It took centuries to get out of that system, and now we're fighting to get back into it. So I think this is a good thing. We'll see what happens with it. The last thing I wanted to talk about, and this is kind of a difficult topic, but I do think it's worth talking about, is when is it acceptable to cheer when someone you dislike dies? And so I bring this up because the Koch brother, one of the Koch brothers died. So he was kind of a libertarian-leaning, you know, wealthy person who donated to a lot. I've seen people that are my friends celebrating his death. The funny thing is, in the same week, we had Ruth Bader Ginsburg have another cancer scare. And certainly there were people on the right that were like, oh, I hope she dies. It's not my cup of tea, but my recommendation is, I think it's crappy to say that, but whatever, I'm not going to judge you. But it's certainly not strategic. It makes your side look like a bunch of idiots. So I would recommend not doing it, but I'm not going to judge you morally for doing it. Having said that, don't pretend, right? If you're the type of person that was excited to see the Koch brother die, then don't get upset like if someone you like dies and people are like, yay. So maybe you didn't like the Koch brothers because you're a Bernie or Trump supporter. Okay, but if Trump dies tomorrow in office or Bernie dies tomorrow in office, you don't get to be offended when people say, yay, they're dead. Yeah, you're right about those that push socialism think they'll be in that tub, but they won't. And I mean, you saw this, I can't remember who exactly said this, but someone in Stalin's regime, right? Said like the academics are the useful idiots. They'll be the first to line up on the wall to be shot and killed. I mean, that's the way it is. You see it now, just with all the social, the wokeness, the cancel culture. People think, well, if I'm joining the mob saying to cancel other people, then I'll be spared from the mob. Nope, doesn't work that way. You're just as likely. But, so anyways, I don't know. It's not my cup of tea. Like, for example, I don't like the policies Ruth Bader Ginsburg pushes. And that's what she does. She pushes policies because she's an activist judge. I don't want her to die. I mean, I want her to die in the sense that we all die someday. I don't want her to be like live in eternal agony or anything like that. But you know, I hope she lives decades more with her family. Now there's a question of if she's struggling with these health problems, is she fit mentally to be on the court? I don't know. That's something to look at. But I'm not going to cheer for the lady's death. I'm not. That's just my opinion. If you want to do it, that's fine. If you want to cheer for the Koch brother dying, or George Soros or anyone else, okay. But just don't pretend that that there's some sort of moral high ground. Even if you say, yes, but I'm right. I'm right that the Koch brothers or George Soros are really crappy, evil people. And so it's okay. Wouldn't you cheer for Hitler dying? I guess, but you have to understand, it's not just a matter of logic. It's also a matter of perception, and that there will be people that perceive that Trump is Hitler. And so if he dies, you might say, well, you're factually wrong, but you can't argue that they're morally wrong, because if they're factually wrong, they're not morally wrong, because they have the moral justification based on their misreading of facts to think the guy deserved to die. So that's why I just try to default away from all that. And also, the other thing I'd like to say to a lot of these people that are celebrating this Koch brother dying is, you know, I would guess, and I probably, in fairness, if you're one of those people and you're watching my channel, you're probably not that, people that watch me are smarter, which is probably true, but it's not just that. It's that you're probably taking the time to actually look up stuff if you're watching me, you know? So you probably know a little more, but I bet, like, a lot of my friends on Facebook are like, yeah, this guy died, and I'm just thinking to myself, like, okay, can you tell me what this guy did? You're happy he's dead. What did he do? They'll be like, oh, he had a bunch of money and bought elections. Okay, but what were his positions? You know, and here's a problem I have, and I never see anyone address this. Like, everyone wants to talk about Citizens United and money in politics. Well, first off, don't blame the player, blame the game, right? Like, if you have a problem with the rules are set up, and if someone's set up in a position to exploit those rules, you can't really blame that person. What you do is you change the rules. The fact that we have such a crappy system because we need to be more informed and vote for people that are willing to get this type of money out of politics, that's not the Koch brothers' fault. It's not even George Soros' fault. I think it sucks that they have so much influence, but we should change the system. And the other thing is, well, if we have such a problem, how many votes, let's say Koch put $1 billion into the 2016 election, $1 billion with a B, I don't know what he put, and let's say it was all behind Trump, which I don't think it was, but let's say that's the case. How many votes do you think that could potentially swing? I have no idea. 100,000? Maybe 1 million? Well, we know Google has the potential to swing 20 million. How many votes does the New York Times swing? Or CNN? Or MSNBC? Or the entertainment industry? Or the academia? Or all of Silicon Valley? Why is it that we're only concerned with, like, oh, this wealthy guy gives X amount of dollars. That's shady, that's buying influence. But where are they buying influence? Well, they're buying it on this network. Okay, if that network is 100% in the bag for one of the candidates, how isn't that just as bad, if not worse? So as a Koch brother, I could theoretically spend $100 million and get myself or my allies on CNN arguing my point of view, or I could just own CNN and have way more influence. But no one ever talks about that. You talk about getting money out of politics. Okay, you going to disband the media corporations? You going to ensure some sort of fairness in media? Then how are we not violating free speech? You know, and again, I go back to, even though I don't agree with them all the time. Ben Shapiro debated Cenk Uygur from the Young Turks like 2 years ago. And Cenk's talking about, oh, Citizens United, you know. And Ben Shapiro's like, okay, Cenk, Buddy Roemer gave you $500 million to start your media channel. Your media channel was totally in the bag for progressives. Do you think that you shouldn't be allowed to do that? Because that's money in politics? And Cenk's like, no, it's different. It's different when we do it. How convenient that all the establishment Democrats, they're for getting money out of politics. They take the money. They take it right now. But they're for getting money out of politics, which basically just amounts to, we don't want the other side getting money. We'll still take CNN. We're not going to say, oh no, stop pushing us, push both sides. We'll still take the New York Times. We'll still take all the national newspapers. We'll still take ABC, NBC, CBS. We'll take all that, which is far more valuable than just money being used to spend to get ads on those networks. So, I mean, I just don't get it. All the anger that's put, at Koch, the Koch brothers, or even at George Soros. And Soros is more nefarious than the Koch brothers. Because what Soros is doing is he's financing people at local elections for things like attorney general, prosecutors, and things like that, and then instructing them basically to not prosecute actual crimes. So to usurp or not follow the oath of office that the people that win were actually given. We see that happening all the time. But even still, as much as I don't like George Soros, and it's worth calling him out, one, you should be specific on what he's actually doing, because otherwise you just sound like a lunatic. Soros, the Koch brothers. Okay, what are the specifics? Which I named some of the specifics with Soros. And second, you should be applying that evenly. I don't know what the answer is. That's when people say Citizens United. Yes, I ran for office. Just for those of you who don't know, I hate to even talk about my personal life. I'm not a wealthy person. I've never made and continue to not make more than $15 an hour in my whole life. I try to work 60, 70 hours a week just so I have a little money to play with. I ran for office. It cost me $5,000, $6,000. I refused to accept one donation of even $1 when I ran because it was something I wanted to do. So I'm not saying, when I say I'm not so sure how we get money out of politics, I'm not saying that because I took a bunch of money. I didn't take $1. It put me about $6,000, $7,000 in the hole, which I'm still recovering from. For an election, I basically knew I didn't have a chance to win. But I felt it was important to try to be a voice for me and regular people around me that I feel like don't have a voice. That's why I did it. But when I hear these, people just say Citizens United, I mean, all the time you just hear these tag words. Citizens United, get rid of it. Get rid of money in politics. Well, what does that mean? Are we getting rid of these networks? Well, no, you can't. That's free speech. Okay, so why does the guy in the corporation that runs Google have the right to have their free speech to influence politics the way they want, but the guy that runs, whatever company the Koch brothers ran, they don't get to use their money to influence how they want? I mean, so I don't know what the answer is. It's a very difficult problem. The real answer is, if we actually had a real free press, then you could solve a lot of this. Just because you take money from a group doesn't necessarily mean you're being corrupt. If I ran again and I took money, fracking's big here in Pennsylvania. If I took money from energy companies, fracking companies, but then voted against them, I wasn't corrupt for taking that money. They might be pissed. If you're selling your vote, that's criminal. If you're just accepting the money, it's not. But the question is, how do we know? Well, we're supposed to have a free press that's supposed to be out there looking at this stuff, but we don't. So I don't know how you change it with law. I don't know exactly what we do. But I'm not going to get excited when people die and act like that somehow solves the problem. But again, I don't judge. That's fine. I think it's a bad strategic move, Republican or Democrat, to cheer for when someone dies. I just think it's strategically bad. I'm not judging you morally, but I will say this. You don't get to get in your moral high horse. If you cheered where the Koch brother died, you don't get to then be upset if someone cheers when Ginsburg dies. That's all I'm saying. I mean, you can. It's your right to do so, but you're a hypocrite. That's it. Both are activists. That's what Ginsburg is. I don't wish her death. I didn't wish the Koch brother death. That's just where I stand on it. So, I don't know. It's a very difficult thing. Clearly, there is a problem. Right, yeah, and rational. That would kind of be my thinking. If I ever run another campaign, what I realize is it's so difficult. I mean, the one thing we have now that we didn't in the past is the internet. And so the internet's the great equalizer. Wanted to make a movie in the 50s? Well, it was very difficult. Want to make a movie today? camera equipment's not that much. The quality of it might not be as good as something that's more professionally shot, but you got a distribution method. You can put it online. Want to talk about the news in the 50s? Even 90s? It was difficult. Want to do it today? Hey, you could be me. You could be doing it on YouTube or wherever until they censor you. Also, by the way, follow me on BitChute. These live videos won't be on BitChute, but all my other ones are. I would really appreciate if everyone did because, all the complaining I do about Google, if I ever would make it to have substantial viewers on here, I'm sure I'd be censored. So I fly under the radar because I only have 8 to 10 people watching a video at a time. But anyways, that's just a little aside. But yeah, I mean, it's just, I hear these people talk about it all the time. Get money out of politics. Unless it's our people, then it's okay. It's like, I don't know. I want to know how much goes. Yeah, I mean, what I've said all along about Google is, at the very least, like I would advocate something like an Internet Bill of Rights that would say these things are like public utilities almost, and so that you can't be kicked out for merely political reasons. Short of that, I don't understand why we can't hold Google to the same account that we would other companies, as far as they should have to admit they are contributing to a campaign and have an estimated dollar amount of what that is. So we can at least see it. How many trillions of dollars worth of advertising and influence did Google give the Democrats and Hillary Clinton? How many will they in the 2020 election? At least leave the people see. And I also think that, there's a difference between being a platform and a publisher. So take Twitter, for example, is the easiest example I can think of at the top of my head. Twitter, listen to this Carlos Maza guy from Vox, VOX, say that Steven Crowder should be kicked off or demonetized for jokes that he told. And basically, Twitter capitulated to this guy. Meanwhile, while this was going on, hundreds, if not thousands of people, including myself, sent to Twitter the tweets that Maza was posting saying, throw milkshakes at conservatives, don't let them feel comfortable to assemble in public. Then a week later, a journalist, conservative, gets milkshakes thrown on him that they thought may have had cement in him while he gets beat to the point where he has a brain hemorrhage. Now, if Twitter's defense is, which this makes sense, why should Twitter be held legally accountable for something some nut puts on their page? They can't police everything. Basically, they're just a platform. It's like the bulletin board outside your post office. Someone puts something crappy up, it's not the post office's fault. If they see it, they rip it down. If not, they're not held accountable for it. But if the post office starts saying, well, we're going to take down all the crappy things we see that only Republicans say and take them down. And then the Republicans say, but what about this crappy thing the Democrat let up? And they leave it up. And then someone is inspired by that to go commit an act. Now they're legally responsible. I feel the same way about Twitter. When they selectively took down stuff in a biased fashion and were alerted over and over again to actual calls for assault and violence by someone on the other side and chose to let that up, and then the very same type of violence happened that was being advocated, they should be held legally accountable. They're no longer a platform. They are a publisher. They are selectively allowing, based on things that aren't just crimes, what to allow up or not, based on political ideology, based on all these other criteria. The same's true of YouTube and their selective bias, and Facebook. If they're going to selectively edit and selectively choose things, then they are publishers. Publishers, if the New York Times posts an article that's a call for violence against conservatives, and then conservatives get beat, they could be held legally responsible. The same should be true of these other places. That's right, they shouldn't be removing content unless it's illegal. Everyone could agree, if you see something that's like a legitimate call to violence, yes, you get rid of it. But once you start to say, for example, and Twitter's the easy example because, you get banned off Twitter if you say there's only 2 genders. That's not violence, that's science. Or if you say there's only 2 sexes. That's a biological fact with the exception of intersex. But biologically, a man is a man and a woman is a woman. That's the truth, right? But you get kicked off Twitter for saying that. That is a political statement on their point. So they're acting as a publisher. Yeah, I've seen that about Tommy, that the police liked the attack of Tommy that was uploaded. Again, I mean, I was talking about that earlier. I can't tell you how many people, UK members on like Above Top Secret I've argued with, they're like, Tommy scum, you know. One, as an American, it's slightly different because I do understand the laws are different. And in the United States, you're allowed to report on trials as they're ongoing. So I can understand being in the UK saying, hey, stupid American, our laws are different, you don't get it. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the vitriol. You can hate Tommy, that's fine. But where's your hatred for the police and for the politicians that allowed the rapes to go on for 3 decades? Where's your hatred for them? Where's your post online about that? No, you're too busy telling, oh, stupid American defending Tommy Robinson. He's trash. Stephen Jackson, Lenley Jackson or whatever, said, I told his real name. Yeah, you're just as cool as all the people that refuse to call Muhammad Ali. Pretty cool. You did it. But that's cool. You make fun of him. You pick on him. You cheer for him to be jailed. That's cool. Forget about the police. Forget about the politicians that allowed the rapes to go on. Forget about the fact that we know Jimmy Savile was connected to how many people in Parliament and was allowed to live his entire life without being held to justice, even though everybody knew what was going on. But you go ahead. Tommy Robinson's the bad guy. Yeah, and I know in that case, I've gone through the ins and outs. Tommy Robinson only reported what was in public. He specifically asked if he was allowed to be on the public side of the law, which the cop said yes. He was told, the judge said after the initial review that his decision didn't influence anyone. The trial was already over. It was just in the sentencing phase. He never called anyone guilty. He always said alleged. Plus, then I could point to cameras being outside, for example, Gary Glitter's trial, who was accused of pedophilia. Standing outside his trial multiple days, filming him, shouting questions at him as he entered the trial, yet no one was ever charged with that. Another guy, Rolf something, that was charged. So, yeah, I mean, it's clear there was a double standard. But this is the case. This is always the case, right? Like, you know, just like in the United States with Trump. They'll go after, well, technically these people lied to the FBI. Technically, so they're allowed. We got to raid their house in the middle of the night. But what about the other side? We know Cheryl Mills lied. We know Huma Abedin lied. We know Hillary Clinton lied. We know that Andrew McCabe lied, who's now getting hired by CNN. They all lied to Congress or the FBI. Why weren't they charged? Well, it's within the discretion of the police. Just like, well, you know, it's within the discretion of the police to not actually arrest child rapist for 3 decades. But the guy that was bitching about him, oh yeah, he shouldn't have been. He technically broke the law. Yeah, Rolf Harris, you're right. So, I mean, like that whole case, again, Tommy Robinson said things I disagree with. Like, he seems to have changed his opinion, but I watched him give a speech in like 2007 or 2008 where he blamed all Muslims for the 7/7 tube attacks. That's not right. That's not right. You know? Yeah, Google did lie to Congress as well. So I'm not defending everything he says. But he's since apologized. He's since said he's worked with Muslims such as Hirsi Ali and Majid Nawaz and others. And Majid Nawaz said it when Tommy first got arrested for this, before he was let go and then resentenced. He said, if only we had as much outrage over the police, over the politician, over the Muslim rapist, as we did Tommy Robinson, maybe some girls would have been spared. And you see the same crap to a lesser extent, right, in the United States. Trump says illegal immigration is a problem, which it is. And that's, that inspired murders. But the Democrats and the media say Trump supporters are all racist, or ICE agents are Nazis, or Trump's a Nazi. Oh, that's not incitement. That's just true. CNN could have a guy on saying Trump's more responsible for more deaths than Mao and Stalin. I mean, it's nuts. The double standard is what gets you, right? And they can all, just like Twitter. Twitter, did you see when Jack Dorsey and his employee were on Joe Rogan's show and Tim Pool was like going back and forth with them? They could say, every single conservative they censored, they could say, well, technically they broke our rules. And then Tim Pool would be like, yes, but here is a liberal person who broke the rules in even a more clear-cut way that you let go. And they'd be like, well, we've made mistakes. It's always that double standard. And at some point, we have to get, until the average people get upset with it. Yeah, I did see that. We need to burn down the GOP and leave no survivors. Was said by someone on CNN. I mean, this is just insanity. And they feel morally righteous and justified. You know, I argue with someone, again, on Above Top Secret, I think's a smart person. I would say they're probably a socialist, very left-leaning person from the UK, who, with a straight face, was commenting, if it comes to, like, Trump getting enough power to enact some of the policies he wants, we have to start murdering Trump supporters. Online said that blatantly. And person after person defended that. Like, well, he's not saying murder them now. He's just saying hypothetically. And wouldn't you have murdered Nazis? Wouldn't you have murdered Hitler? And you see this crap. Look, I don't hear anyone talking about this. This is the last thing I'll talk about. Because I have a fantasy football draft. Or a fantasy American football draft, for those of you in different countries, coming up tonight. And I intend on winning this year, so I have to leave for that here around 4:30. But I don't hear anyone talking about this, right? So we have the idea of what is, in the United States, they say most domestic terrorism comes from the right wing. And I've done videos on this. Like, there's tons of questions. How do you define domestic terrorism? Why is it important to focus on that specific types of murder as opposed to, like, regular murder? And these are all good questions. And there's answers to all these as well. You know, but these are questions that come up. What makes these people right-wing? Right? If a guy says, I'm killing people because I don't like immigrants and because I think that climate change is going to kill us all in 100 years if we don't do something drastic. Why is that person right-wing? Why is racial identitarianism right-wing in the first place? You know what I mean? So, like, there's tons of questions. But here's what I never hear talked about. Aside from all of that, I truly believe that what you see happen is when a community feels that they've been marginalized to a point where they don't have any sort of voice whatsoever, that they'll act out, some of them, in the most heinous ways. And so, you can have institutional, like, terrorism, like when the Democrats were controlling the KKK, right? That's possible, where you could have this group that's basically sanctioned to go do terrible things to people based on their race or something. Domestic terrorism by any other, except it's not just terrorism, it's basically state-sponsored. Like, that's incredible, that's insane, right? But that's rare, especially in the United States now, or in the first world now. What's more likely to happen is you have radicals that have some sort of political power, and that's an outlet for them. And that outlet's important. So if you're, for example, black, and you think that you're a victim, and the world's racist, and the United States is, everything about the United States is founded on racism, no one's silencing you. You can go online and say that. You can go to campus and say that. You could be a celebrity and say that. You could hear other celebrities saying that. You hear everyone at your campus saying that. You hear a bunch of politicians saying that. Right? That's not an opinion that you can't say. If you even want to go so far as to say, I believe that white people are evil. I believe we should have a black country. You could say that. You know how I know that? You could say you can even say that in conjunction with being homophobic and things. Because the big story this week was Beto said, can you believe we live in a country where the 8 KKK members stood in the street corner? Yeah, they got a permit and whatever. That sucks. Screw the KKK. But free speech and all, that's the downside of free speech, but it's still well worth it. Meanwhile, when the Covington kids were getting harassed, I was shocked to find out that I talked to person after person that said the Black Hebrew Israelites, the racist group that was attacking them, that was shouting racial slurs and homophobic slurs, they're on cities in the corners all over the place without permits. They're basically just ignored. People walk by. Even now, one of their leaders in Florida was accused of decapitating someone and arrested for it and murdering several people, even though that they've been linked to acts of violence, they're basically just ignored. They can say what they want. No one's freaking out. Now take the subway in New York City every day and have 12 KKK members standing there like the Black Hebrew Israelites. You think people are just going to ignore them? They'll just walk by? The police will just let them go? No one's going to bat an eye? Of course not. So the problem is, these groups, and so I take this even to a group like Antifa. It's popular being Antifa in the right circles. If you're in Portland, if you're in Seattle, if you're in LA, those places, super hefty liberal, you got the entertainment industry, you're nodding and winking at you. The media's nodding and winking. Democratic politicians, they're telling you burn down the Republican Party. They're telling you they're Nazis. They're telling you they're all racist scum. You know, they want to be like the people that were in the sit-ins. They're fighting racism. It's popular. It's cool. You're out there. You got people on TV talking about you, defending you. The police in these towns, they ain't doing crap to you. So you're not going to see a lot of shootings or stabbings from that group. Because they have a vent. Now watch what happens when it does happen, though. Because it's probably not going to be a shooting. Someone's going to get hit with a bike lock or a baton, and it's going to kill him. Or it's going to leave him brain dead. And then, only then, all of a sudden, we'll be forced to, I guess we have to arrest that one person. I guess this act of violence was bad. And people will, you'll see them then slowly walk away. Then once the police start actually arresting these people, that's when you'll see the real violence. Does that mean the police shouldn't arrest them? No, that's not what I'm saying. But what happens is you allow a hateful organization to build up and up and up and up and up because you give it mainstream support. And then finally, when you say enough is enough and it's the mainstream support collapses, there's going to be a really tenuous period where you have all these people that were in that and they're not just going to walk away when the mainstream support collapses. They're going to continue being violent. Then they're going to be pushed back on by law enforcement. Then they're going to be attacked by the mainstream that are saying this group's wrong. They're violent. Then they're going to act out in even more crazy ways because they feel that's the only outlet they have. That's where we're at with white supremacy. It built up and up and up. The Jim Crow era, the Democrats running it, built up and up and up, and then it collapsed. And now it's pathetic. And yes, even a pathetic, disgusting group like that could have some psycho that goes out and kills real-world people. Absolutely. But again, how are we defining that they're right-wing? How are we defining which are domestic acts of terrorism and which aren't? And will we start to see more on the left when there's not mainstream acceptance of the left's violence? That's my prediction. I don't see anyone talk about that. They just say, there's more right-wing violence. Well, there's no right-wing voice. The white supremacists, we all know they're a joke. No one gives them a platform. That's why I say, let them talk. Beat them with arguments. You know? And how many times do you see people show up to an Antifa rally or to a Democrat rally and start on the right and start fights? Almost never. It's almost always some group on the right wants to have a rally and the Antifa shows up, or some group on the left shows up, and then they mutually clash. Or just Antifa clashes. If you're that group on the right, you're already marginalized. People on the right hate you. You keep getting beat up. The police don't care. You're some scumbag. So you fight back. You know, school shooters, the students that shoot in school, it's not the kids that are outgoing, that are popular, that people are listening to. It's the people that feel like they don't have a voice. Now, does that mean, pity the poor white supremacist, pity the school shooter? No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, let's see what happens. Let's see what happens when you've bred generation after generation to think that this country's founded on racism, that people based on their skin color or gender are somehow evil, crappy people. And then all of a sudden, you take that away from them. So, I don't know. And I agree with you, identitarianism is not right-wing. You know? Which group right now? And again,
I don't blame the left wing either. Like, if it's not, we should not judge any group based on what some nut does in that group. For example, if I'm for abolishing the Electoral College, and someone goes out and shoots a bunch of people and say, this is to get rid of the Electoral College, that doesn't mean that somehow I'm at fault, or that somehow, well, we can't talk about getting rid of the Electoral College. Now, we shouldn't be for getting rid of the Electoral College. But that's just one example. If I'm for tax cuts, and some guy goes out and shoots a bunch of people and says, this is because I'm taxed too much, that doesn't mean that I'm responsible. If I'm for stopping climate change, and the guy in Christchurch and the guy in El Paso both said that was part of why they were shooting people, that doesn't mean that, oh, you can't talk about climate change. We all just need to, this is a product of this, cancel culture, of this victimhood being points where anytime someone accuses you, you just, you have to be on the defensive. I just say, yeah, I think illegal immigration's a problem. I think that guy in El Paso deserves the harshest death penalty possible. His views don't represent mine. Just because we agreed on something doesn't mean that my idea is a bad idea. And it's fun how they selectively apply it. Now, the Dayton shooter, that didn't matter. Or the El Paso shooter or the Christchurch talking about climate change, that didn't matter. It was just their views on immigration that mattered. So that's exactly what... Right, and I talk about this with Bernie all the time. Bernie fundraised off of Kathy Gifford getting shot, and he said, is it even safe to not be right-wing and walk in these communities? The right wing needs to tamp down their violence. That's the fundraiser he sent down. Then fast forward to his shooter. It's one of his supporters shooting Steve Scalise and trying to kill Republicans on a ball field. And he said, all violence is bad. And Pelosi said, how dare Republicans try to blame this on left-wing rhetoric. Then go back to Charlottesville. Now we're back to, it's just right-wing rhetoric. It's Trump. Then we go to Dayton. Oh, no. It doesn't matter that guy was a leftist. Pittsburgh synagogue shooter, who specifically wrote over and over how he hated Trump, thought Trump was sold out to the Jews. Whose fault was that? Trump's fault. Trump's the anti-Semite. Then when you have anti-Semitic things said by people on the left, or supposed anti-Semitic things, not a peep. It's just ridiculous. So, all right. Unless anyone has anything specific they want to talk about, that's about it. I'm going to be trying to put more material up. I do have my anniversary's coming up next week, so I might be gone a day or two for that. But other than that, I'll be putting stuff up consistently. I'm going to try, just for those of you that don't know, I'm trying my hardest to work with the Republican Party in Pennsylvania to try to help their efforts in 2020. And so if anyone has any ideas on how I could help do that, aside from these videos, I'm doing other things. I'm going to meetings and stuff. And I really do think that we as individuals, even if you're not a Republican, you should be appalled by what we see going on with the people I'm talking about, the establishment Democrats. And you should be out there, it doesn't mean you have to be out there screaming at people, knocking on doors or anything like that. But just let your friends and family know what's going on. They control this narrative, And the other thing is, it's not worth losing friends over, though. If people are going to be upset about it, change the subject, don't talk about it. But, so that's what I got going on. Please follow me on BitChute. I'm at Twitter, though I haven't been tweeting much lately, at NorRobert. And I'm trying to get to 1,000 subscribers. So, I went to this Republican event last Thursday. It's something that I could have live streamed some of while I was there. There were a couple congressmen there. I met Jeffrey Lord, who was Trump supporter, used to be on CNN. Now he's on Hannity all the time. So I got to talk to them. But I can't live stream until I have 1,000 subscribers. So I'm trying to get up to that. So if you could recommend me to someone, your friends or something that might be interested. And I'm going to be doing more videos and trying to get them sent out, connected to people in the Republicans about kind of just media and DNC hypocrisy. So thanks everyone for watching. I'm going to head out and get ready for my fantasy football draft now. But everyone, thanks for being here and have a good one.